Okay. So, what inspired you to produce Halfway Home as your first documentary film?
What motivated me to produce Halfway Home and direct is because I wanted to do a project that would allow me to be creative, but at the same time help those in my community. And I just felt like, I didn't want to be one of those people that, doesn't like how something is going and don't do anything about it, just talk and complain. And I didn't want to, I was like, let me just not talk about it, let me be about it. And so that's where it all comes from.
Okay. So, please share with us what this documentary is about.
It's about men and or women in transition from prison back into the community with the support of a life coach.
Okay. What challenges did you face putting together the trailer and the teaser reel?
I faced a couple of challenges. For one, just trying to get in contact with someone who has been in prison. I know that might sound kind of strange and odd, but it was challenging because I was specifically reaching out to facilities and halfway houses, as opposed to just walking up to people on the street saying, do you know anybody who would be interested in sharing their story, who's been through this, that, and the third. And so when I was reaching these different facilities and halfway houses, a lot of the times a few of them were okay with it, and then they backed out. Others didn't want to have anything to do with it, and others just outright just never returned a phone call or said anything. So that was one challenge. The other was the fact that the professional video camera that I used to create the teaser reel that you see on the website is that I only had it for half the shoot, so I had to use my BlackBerry to get the remainder of the shots and hope that the audio would be okay and things like that using my BlackBerry. And fortunately, it all works out.
If any, what were the initial concerns interacting with the participant who was a convicted rapist?
With anything, it's definitely initial concerns, because it's like, you like the lion's den. You walk into a lion's den, you know what a lion does, what it's capable of. So, you're walking in like that. But at the same time, once I had put things into perspective, then I was okay with it, because the reality is, just walking outside your door, you could face anything could go down. And so, that helped me to put those concerns at ease.
Okay, so no safety concerns throughout with him or any of the reformed persons at the halfway house?
No safety concerns throughout, just initially, at the end of the day, I was basically a one-man show. I was responsible for the audio, I was responsible for the video, and so I was there basically at the end of the day by myself, with the exception of the time when the life coach was present that you see in the teaser. There was only time where I wasn't by myself. There was no security around as far as being in the halfway house. So, but at the same time, I spoke to these gentlemen that I met while I was filming Matthew Randall from the trailer, and everything was fine. I didn't have any fears or concerns about my safety. Again, for the same reason, like I said earlier, once I put things into perspective, that helped with those things.
How do you think the victim would feel about the acknowledgement of this guy's story?
In general, I think, more than likely the victim would definitely have a problem with him getting any type of recognition or light of his side of the story, based upon what she experienced, as well as her family, and even those who don't have not experienced that, definitely have some concerns about, giving attention to individuals such as him, particularly the crime that he's committed, because, at the end of the day, people can have understanding maybe about somebody, doing drugs or murder, because you can have, you can kind of justify that. You can say, well, maybe it was self-defense, or, somebody just did it sold drugs temporarily, just trying to make ends meet. but when it comes to rape, there is no justification for that. There is no explanation for somebody forcing their will upon someone.
Okay. Just curious. Do you or maybe a family member have a criminal history?
I don't have a criminal record. However, as far as relatives, yes, I do have relatives that have a criminal record.
Okay, so do you mind sharing with us?
One relative was tried and convicted for fraud. Another relative was tried for illegal possession of substance, and off and on, in and out of prison due to that. Also because they was also hooked on the illegal substances as well. So that's a factor as well.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. Going back to how this may affect the victim, have you thought about how others who have been victims would feel about this?
I have thought about that, actually. I thought about, at the end of the day, they will more than likely be disturbed by it. And a person has every right to feel that way based upon that type of experience. But I also have understanding for the simple fact that I myself was taken advantage of. I was molested when I was 7 years old.
Wow. So you were a victim at 7 years old. Wow, that's deep. How were you able to sit in a room and interview this man after what you yourself have been through?
Well, I could go back a little bit for that. What I would have to say is that before I had that experience, one of the things that helped is that my parents talked to me early on about my private parts and what's appropriate touch and what's not appropriate. And, let me know if anything like that happens where I'm being inappropriately touched, to let them know. And so when push come to shove, unfortunately, I was faced with that circumstance. I was able to go to my parents and tell them, and they believed me, and they took, they made sure I got to the hospital to be examined, and took the case to court, and took this person to court, and he was tried and he was convicted, for what he's done. Also, on 2 occasions, I've seen him, once with my mother and once while I was out by myself. And, to my surprise, I didn't have any feelings of aggression or resentment towards the individual. So that let me know that I was no longer that person's victim at that time. So when it came time for me to interact with Matthew Randall, I was able to go ahead and do it. And I'm sorry, I got
So that's
lost.
how you were able to sit in the room with him?
Yes, right,
Okay.
exactly.
Due to you. Okay, so due to your own personal experience, that's how you were able to sit in the room with him?
Right, this is my own personal experience. And then on top of that, the opportunity, as far as me working on this project, let me know for sure whether or not I was over the situation that I experienced when I was 7 years old. Because when I was interacting with Matthew Randall, I didn't look at him like he was a person that took advantage of me. And I didn't have all these feelings of aggression or whatever well up in me. So that's how I really officially knew, after some time had passed, even more, and coming into this situation.
So basically, by taking the power back, that's how you were able to sit in the room with him and deal with Matthew Randall, because you already had power over the situation. You weren't a victim anymore.
Exactly.
Okay. So at any point did you share with Matthew Randall the pain of your experience?
I did think about it for a moment, but once I knew for a fact that I was no longer a victim, I realized there was really no need for me to share that with with him.
Why not?
Because I was no longer harboring any feelings of aggression based upon what I had experienced when I was 7 years old, and at the same time, you know, in order for me to get the story that I needed, and in order for him to be transparent, I also didn't think it would be helpful for me to share that, because it wouldn't help the situation if Matthew Randall was wondering if I'm looking at him as my aggressor from my past.
Okay, thank you for that. Ultimately, how did this experience affect you?
Ultimately, I think it affected me in a positive way, because it allowed me to, you know, really examine myself to, you know, find out, you know, was I still being haunted by anything that happened to me when I was 7 years old, despite the fact I ran into my aggressor a couple of times after the fact, later on when he was released. However, so, you know, based upon those things, those factors, I knew that I was no longer that person's victim. And you know, and I think that's really important, because at the end of the day, some, you know, experience like that can haunt you for the rest of your life. I mean, at the end of the day, of course, I'm never going to forget it. It's always going to be a part of my memory bank, you know. However, it's not affecting my interactions with the opposite sex. I'm happily married, and we recently had our first child together, you know, so I'm just grateful that this opportunity allowed me to know that I was no longer a victim, and it gave me an opportunity to show what people go through who are transitioning from prison back into the community, and the challenges that they face through Matthew Randall as an example.
So you're saying the overall experience was a positive one?
Yes, so the overall experience was positive.
Okay. So going forward, how has this impacted your life, or rather, what have you learned about yourself?
Well, one of the things I learned about myself that I realized I still struggle with is asking people for help. Pardon me. You know, I struggle with asking people for help, especially in a situation where a person should be compensated financially. And, you know, so it was challenging asking initially, would the life coach get involved and participate, even though I know the kind of person that she is based upon the moments I've spent with her, that she would more than likely do it. But at the same time, you know, it's hard to ask people to do something when you're not in a position to financially compensate them. But she was gracious enough to step up to the plate and help out, and I really appreciate that. The same thing with the composer, the person who contributed the music to the track. He was gracious and volunteered to do that, and I really appreciate that. As well as when you go onto the website, you'll see the bios of the people that are part of the projects, and you know, they were again gracious to create the bios after I asked them to put it, you know, so I can post it on the website to bring attention to this project that we're all collaborating on. So I'm just so that's something I struggle with. You know, I realize I still struggle with asking for help from people, but I guess that stems from always seeing how people aren't getting help when they need it.
Yes, I definitely understand that one. Okay, so I have a couple of more questions to ask you, and then we're going to be through. Once you've secured the money to shoot the film, what do you hope to accomplish?
Well, I'd like to be able, it would be nice if we would get picked up as a docuseries so that we can continue to help people state to state who are transitioning from prison back into the community, as well as even travel abroad, because the experience may be different with someone overseas versus here in the States. So it would be a privilege to be able to do something where we are helping and also educating and informing a population about what challenges these individuals face. And it could also help someone who when they're in situations where their back is against the wall, to not take that trip down that road that can land them in prison, or even, youth dealing with peer pressure, as well as adults deal with peer pressure, whether they choose to admit it or not. And so I just think the overall project would be helpful, educating folks.
Okay. So this is my final question. I noticed that out here on this beautiful sunny day, you brought your son out with you. I wanted to know if you would mind telling us his name and age.
You are so silly.
I guess that's a no. So thank you for your time, and we appreciate it.